You know, there's something about luxury watches that catches people's attention. Rolex, Patek, Audemars, these aren't just timepieces, they're status symbols. They say, "I've made it," but when police knocked on Keiron Leonard's door in the quiet village of Blackrod, Bolton, and found 3 Rolex watches worth over £80,000, they weren't celebrating success. They were looking at the price tag of misery. This is the story of how a 6-month police investigation brought down a cocaine empire operating right in the heart of Greater Manchester. It's a story of 3 men, 14 kilograms of cocaine, and the lavish lifestyle that ultimately led to their downfall. This is the case of Keiron Leonard and his gang. If you're watching and haven't already, hit subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Let me take you back to November 2023. While most of us were thinking about Christmas shopping and winter holidays, detectives at Greater Manchester Police's Bolton Challenger unit were noticing something troubling. Intelligence was coming in about large quantities of cocaine flooding into the Bolton and Bury areas. Now, drug dealing isn't new to any major city, but this wasn't your typical street corner operation. We're talking about wholesale quantities, kilograms of cocaine being moved, broken down, and distributed across the region. Someone was running a sophisticated supply network, and the police wanted to know who. The Bolton Challenger unit, part of GMP's program Challenger initiative that targets serious and organized crime, launched a covert investigation. And when I say covert, I mean they were working in the shadows. Surveillance, intelligence gathering, building a picture piece by piece. Think of it like putting together a jigsaw puzzle, except the pieces keep moving, and nobody wants you to see the final picture. Over the next 6 months, from November 2023 through to May 2024, the detectives started connecting the dots. They identified a pattern, money flowing one way, drugs flowing the other. And at the center of it all, 3 names kept appearing: Keiron Leonard, Rhys Shaw, and Mark Cosgrave. But here's the thing about drug investigations. Knowing someone's involved and proving it in court are 2 very different things. The police needed evidence, hard, undeniable evidence that would stand up in front of a judge and jury. So they watched, they gathered intelligence, they built their case. And by May 2024, they were ready to strike. It's the 10th of May, 2024. The sun's barely up, and most people in Bolton and Bury are still asleep or just starting their morning routines. But for the officers of the Bolton Challenger unit, this is game time. They'd spent months preparing for this moment, coordinating multiple simultaneous raids, making sure every detail was perfect. In operations, like this, timing is everything. You hit all the targets at once, before anyone can warn the others or destroy evidence. Let's start with Mark Cosgrave, the oldest member of the gang at 52 years old. Officers descended on his home on Medlock Way in Bury early that morning. The video footage from the raid tells you everything you need to know about how unexpected this was. Cosgrave was still in bed when police entered his home.
Mark, listen to what I've got to say, mate.
Yeah.
This moment in time, you're under arrest, okay, pal?
Yeah.
Conspiracy to supply Class A drugs, okay?
Yeah.
So you don't have to say anything, but it may be defensive. You don't mention when questioned. Something that's a later line in court, and if you do say maybe given evidence, you understand that?
Yeah.
Okay, it's for a prompt and effective investigation.
That is the reality when you choose a life of crime. One moment you're sleeping, the next there are police officers in your bedroom telling you you're under arrest for drug offences. But it wasn't just Cosgrave they found in that house. The search revealed cocaine worth over £24,000. And it gets more interesting. They also found adulterants, substances used to dilute or cut the cocaine to make it go further and increase profits. Plus, and this is crucial, they found a hydraulic press. Now, you might be wondering, what's a hydraulic press doing in a drug dealer's house? Well, here's how the operation worked. After cocaine is diluted with adulterants, it becomes powder, but dealers often want it in block form for easier transport and distribution. That's where the hydraulic press comes in. It compresses the diluted cocaine back into solid blocks. It's essentially a drug production line, right there in a residential street in Bury. Meanwhile, across town in Bury, Rhys Shaw was also being arrested at his home on Albert Road. He was 34 years old and, as police would later establish, Leonard's right-hand man. When officers searched his property, they found £7,000 in cash. Not in a bank account, mind you, just cash, sitting in his home. Try explaining that to the taxman, but the biggest catch of the day was Keiron Leonard himself. Leonard lived in Causton Grove, Blackrod, a pleasant area of Bolton, the kind of place where you wouldn't expect to find the head of a drug gang. He was 31 years old at the time, and he was about to have a very bad day. Officers spotted Leonard in his Volkswagen and moved in to arrest him. And we actually have body-worn camera footage of this moment, which gives us a fascinating glimpse into Leonard's state of mind.
So you've been arrested,
right,
on suspicion of being concerned.
Suspicion?
Yeah, of being concerned in the supply of Class A drugs and conspiracy to supply Class A drugs as well.
Why on?
Pardon?
Why on?
We'll tell you later on.
I know it.
Alright, so you don't have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you don't mention when questioned.
That's fine.
Something which you may later on in court. Anything you do, say maybe giving evidence, okay?
As officers explain why he's being arrested, Leonard keeps asking, "Why though? Why though?" There's something almost surreal about that response. Here's a man who's been running a cocaine supply network for months, and he seems genuinely confused about why the police might be interested in him. Whether that's genuine confusion, denial, or just shock, we'll never know. But it's been burned into the case record forever. The search of Leonard's home in Blackrod revealed something that would become central to the case. Those 3 Rolex watches, worth more than £80,000 combined. Think about that for a moment. £80,000 on your wrist. That's more than many people earn in 2 years, just sitting on one person's arm. These weren't the only luxury items police found. Evidence showed Leonard was living what they described as a lavish lifestyle. Designer clothes, luxury holidays, expensive cars, all the trappings of wealth. But here's the question that was probably running through everyone's mind. Where does a 31-year-old from Bolton get the money for 3 Rolex watches? The answer, police alleged, was simple: cocaine. Now that all 3 men were in custody, detectives could start piecing together exactly how this operation worked. And what they found was a textbook example of an organized drug supply chain. Let me break down how this gang operated, because it's actually quite sophisticated. At the top, you had Keiron Leonard. Think of him as the CEO of this criminal enterprise. He was the one organizing the influx of large quantities of cocaine into the region. He arranged the purchases, likely from suppliers further up the chain that police may still be investigating. He provided the financing, and he took the lion's share of the profits. Leonard was the orchestrator, the one calling the shots. He instructed the others on what to do, when to collect cash, when to move drugs. He was living that lavish lifestyle on the proceeds, turning drug money into Rolex watches and luxury holidays. Then you had Reece Shaw, Leonard's right-hand man. Shaw was the operational guy, the one actually out there doing the legwork. His job was to supply the street-level dealers and collect the cash from drug sales. Think of him as the middle management, taking orders from Leonard and making sure they got carried out. Shaw was essentially the link between the wholesale operation Leonard ran and the actual street dealers selling to users. He'd deliver drugs to dealers, collect their payments, and bring the money back up the chain. It's a crucial role in any drug operation, and that £7,000 in cash found at his home shows he was handling significant amounts of money. And finally, you had Mark Cosgrave, the oldest member at 52. His role was different but equally important. Cosgrave was the production guy, the one who handled the drugs themselves. His job was threefold: storage, dilution, and repackaging. The cocaine would come to Cosgrave's address in large quantities. He'd store it there, which is risky because if police come knocking, you're caught red-handed, which is exactly what happened. Then he'd use those adulterants to dilute the cocaine, stretching it out to maximize profits. Finally, he'd use that hydraulic press to repackage everything into blocks ready for distribution. It's like a little factory, turning expensive wholesale cocaine into even more expensive retail cocaine by diluting it and pressing it back into sellable form. According to the evidence police gathered, during those 6 months between November 2023 and May 2024, this operation moved about 14 kilograms of cocaine. That's roughly 30 pounds of pure cocaine, though by the time it was cut with adulterants, the amount hitting the streets would have been significantly more. To put that in perspective, a gram of cocaine on UK streets might cost anywhere from £40 to £100, depending on quality and location. 14 kilograms is 14,000 grams. Even at the lower end of street prices, we're talking about potential street value in the hundreds of thousands of pounds. No wonder Leonard could afford those Rolex watches. After their arrests in May 2024, all 3 men were charged with being concerned in the supply of cocaine, a Class A drug, under the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971. Now, let me explain what being concerned in the supply actually means, because it's broader than you might think. In UK law, you don't have to be the person actually handing drugs to users to be guilty of drug supply offences. If you're involved in any part of the supply chain, organising logistics, providing storage, facilitating communications, financing the operation, you can be charged with being concerned in the supply. This is crucial because it means everyone in the chain shares responsibility. You can't just say, well, I only stored it, or I only collected the money. If you're part of the supply network, you're culpable, and the sentences reflect that. For Class A drugs like cocaine, which the law treats as the most serious category, the maximum sentence is life imprisonment. Even people playing relatively minor roles can face 7 years or more. Major organisers can get sentences exceeding 20 years. The courts look at several factors when sentencing: how much drug was involved, what was your role, were you part of an organised crime group, did you exploit vulnerable people? All of these can increase your sentence. All 3 men were remanded in custody, meaning they were held in jail while awaiting trial. And here's something interesting: they all pleaded guilty. Now, in the criminal justice system, pleading guilty can sometimes get you a reduced sentence because it saves the time and expense of a trial and shows some acceptance of responsibility. But even with any reduction for guilty pleas, the sentences handed down were substantial. Keiron Leonard, as the organiser and primary beneficiary of the operation, received the longest sentence, 14 years and 3 months in prison. That's longer than many people spend in their entire careers at one company. Leonard won't see freedom until he's in his mid-40s at the earliest. Rhys Shaw, the right-hand man who handled distribution and collections, received 7 years and 6 months. And Mark Cosgrave, who stored and prepared the drugs, got 6 years and 9 months. All told, that's more than 28 years of prison time handed out between the 3 of them. The sentencing happened in 2025 at a Manchester court, and on the 7th of November 2025, Greater Manchester Police publicly released details of the investigation and the sentences. But this case isn't just about 3 men from Bolton and Bury. It's part of something much bigger. The Bolton Challenger unit that investigated this case is part of Programme Challenger, which is Greater Manchester Police's comprehensive response to serious and organised crime across the region. Programme Challenger targets all sorts of offences: county lines, drug dealing, exploitation of children and vulnerable adults, modern slavery, economic crime, firearms offences. It's a multi-agency effort that recognises organised crime isn't just one thing. It's interconnected networks of criminality that need coordinated responses. And they're busy. In March 2025, just a few months before the sentencing in this case, GMP's City of Manchester Challenger unit executed 10 simultaneous warrants across Longside, Ardwick and Northmoor. They seized Class A drugs, zombie knives, a Breitling watch, another luxury timepiece, notice the pattern, and arrested 7 people. Detective Inspector Christopher Woodburn, speaking about that operation, emphasised that the aim is to disrupt and dismantle organised crime gangs, and that intelligence from the community is vital. That last point is crucial: intelligence from the community. After the sentencing of Leonard, Shaw and Cosgrave, Detective Inspector Waywell of the Bolton Challenger unit made a public statement. He said he was pleased with the outcome and that it should send a stark message to those considering drug offences. But then he said something really important. He stressed that the team will always pursue and actively target those involved in the supply of drugs, and that such criminality causes misery and often involves the exploitation of children and vulnerable people. It's easy to look at this case and just see 3 men who got caught and went to prison. But behind those 14 kilograms of cocaine are real victims, people struggling with addiction, families torn apart, young people, sometimes children, exploited as drug runners, violence on the streets as different gangs compete for territory. That's what Detective Inspector Waywell means when he talks about misery. Drug supply isn't a victimless crime, even when the dealers themselves look like respectable people living in nice houses in places like Blackrod. Waywell also urged members of the public to continue providing intelligence to the police, emphasizing that community information is vital to investigations. And that makes sense when you think about it. Police can't be everywhere. They can't see everything. But communities know when something's not right. They notice patterns. They see people living beyond their means, suspicious activity, comings and goings at odd hours. The investigation into Leonard, Shaw, and Cosgrave likely started with intelligence from people who noticed something was off. Someone saw something and said something, and that eventually led to 3 drug dealers going to prison for a combined 28 years. So what can we learn from the downfall of the Blackrod dealer? First, there's the obvious lesson about crime and punishment. Leonard, Shaw, and Cosgrave probably thought they were being clever. They had their roles clearly defined. They were making serious money. Leonard was enjoying his Rolex watches and luxury lifestyle. But here's the thing about organized crime. The more organized it is, the more evidence you create. Every transaction, every phone call, every movement of drugs or money creates a trail. And modern police forces are good at following trails. 6 months of surveillance and intelligence gathering was all it took to build a case strong enough that all 3 men pleaded guilty. They knew the evidence was overwhelming. Second, there's a lesson about lifestyle. Those Rolex watches that looked so good on Leonard's wrist, they became exhibits in a criminal case, evidence of unexplained wealth, proof that his legitimate income couldn't possibly account for his lifestyle. In the criminal world, there's an old saying, "Don't let your lifestyle write checks your cover story can't cash." Leonard's lifestyle was writing very large checks indeed, and when police came asking questions, there was no legitimate explanation for where the money came from. Third, and perhaps most importantly, there's a lesson about consequences. These 3 men didn't just hurt themselves. Think about all the people who bought the cocaine they supplied. Think about the families affected by addiction. Think about any violence that might have occurred in their distribution network. Drug supply creates ripples of harm that spread far beyond the dealers themselves, and that's why the sentences are so severe. The courts recognize that these crimes, while they might look like simple business transactions to the people involved, cause genuine harm to communities. Detective Inspector Waywell's comment about exploitation of children and vulnerable adults isn't just rhetoric. County Line's drug dealing, which program Challenger targets, often involves gangs from cities recruiting teenagers from smaller towns to transport and sell drugs. These young people get criminal records, get involved in violence, have their lives derailed, all to make people like Leonard, Shaw, and Cosgrave richer. The seizure of high-value watches, cash, and drugs in this case also highlights something important about modern policing: asset confiscation. It's not enough just to put drug dealers in prison. If they get to keep their ill-gotten gains, what message does that send? That crime pays, as long as you're willing to do the time. No. Modern asset confiscation laws allow police to seize property that's been purchased with the proceeds of crime. Those Rolex watches, gone. The cash, seized. The luxury items, confiscated. It's about removing the financial incentive for crime and making sure criminals don't get to enjoy their profits, either now or when they eventually get out of prison. So here we are, at the end of the story of Keiron Leonard and his cocaine supply network in Bolton and Bury. What started as intelligence reports about drugs flooding into the area ended with 3 men facing decades behind bars. 14 kilograms of cocaine taken off the streets. Over £80,000 worth of luxury watches seized. Thousands in cash confiscated. It's a dramatic story, but it's also a familiar one. Drug supply networks get set up, they operate for a while, police investigate, arrests are made, and the cycle starts over somewhere else with someone else. But each case matters. Each investigation disrupts a network. Each conviction sends a message. And each seizure of drugs is drugs that won't make it onto the streets, into people's bodies, into their bloodstreams, into their lives. For the residents of Blackrod, Bolton, and Bury, the removal of this supply network means a safer community. For the police officers who spent 6 months building this case, it means justice done. For the courts who sentenced these men, it means upholding the law and protecting society. And for Keiron Leonard, Rhys Shaw, and Mark Cosgrave, it means years behind bars to reflect on the choices that led them to run a cocaine empire from the streets of Greater Manchester. Those Rolex watches might have looked impressive once upon a time, but in the end, they became nothing more than evidence tags in a police property room, and their owner became prisoner number whatever he was assigned, with more than 14 years to serve. That's the real price of the lavish lifestyle. And it's a price that keeps getting paid day after day, year after year, behind prison walls. This has been the story of the Blackrod drug dealer, a crime of ambition, greed, organized crime, and ultimately justice. Thanks for watching.